Yo, 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 we live. Seed Talk, stuff to make your seeds walk. We got a very, very, very special guest in the building, in the house on Seed Talk. Been wanting to get this person on low key for a minute just to talk hip hop, talk about politics, just talk about culture in general. Someone I respect and I admire and whatnot. Before we get it popping, though, make sure you please share and comment, get those algorithms going. I know we got something really good going on here with Seed Talk, and we should not keep this to ourselves. Let's say anything worth sharing is not yours to keep. So put that out there, man. Like tell people about Seed Talk. If you want to be on the show, I always tell people, and people have taken me up on that. They've inboxed me, DM me, say I want to be on the show, promote my business and whatnot. Love to have you on the show, so you to promote your business, support what you got going. Even if you just want to support your crazy ideas and your opinions and your commentary, trust me, I can turn it into a very, very, very viable, topic, and we can get into it. So please make sure you share and you comment and just, engage and make sure you donate to Seed Talk, Cash App, Logic, I'm in, Venmo, Logic, I'm in, slavery's over. But, us as artists, and Julie, she can put her stuff in the comments too when this airs. But us as artists, man, this is a part of our, artistry. They say you should have 7 modes of income. Well, this is one of ours. Donate to it. And Julie is an artist, been doing her thing a while, in the city and all over. So, and, just people need, contributions and whatnot, So give us our flowers while we still alive, man. Give us our chips with dip, contribute to the bag. Anyways, with no further ado, we got a very special guest in the building. It's Julie C. What's happening? All right. So let's get this started real quick. I mean, because I think like over the past decade or more, we've always seen each other, exchange numbers. You know what I'm saying? My number's been the same.
Me too. There might be 2 decades.
Yeah, a minute. We've always seen each other, respected each other as MCs and artists and artist activists and educators, but we never really had a sit down. And I've never known your Genesis story. And I want to tap into that. What makes Julie C the superhero? What's the Genesis story? And and let people know who Julie C is. You can let them know what Julie, C stands for. And like, where'd you grow up? Are you a transplant? Because, I tell everybody I'm a transplant. I've been here 30 plus years, born in Cleveland, raised in Cincinnati. What's
really? I didn't know that. See, I think that we need to change those standards though, because at this point, I feel like if you had 30 years in Seattle,
I'm definitely from Seattle. I got 206 bones in my body, for real.
See, I was born in LA, but my family moved to Redmond, the east side, which is a suburb of Seattle, for those that might not know, when I was 1. So, back then, and I'm 38 now, so I was born in 1984. There was not much in Redmond besides Microsoft and Nintendo. It was interesting.
Yeah. So
and
why did you
206 back then too, by the way?
You said what?
It was the 206 back then too.
It wasn't the 425 back in the day.
425 yet. Yep. No 253, none of any of that.
This is Washington talk right now. We only got about like three area codes, I think. 425, 253, 206, and 503. I think those are our 4 area codes. That might maybe 360, maybe.
3, yeah. There's for the Olympia heads, yeah.
Yeah, 360. That's a dope area code. It's not doper than 206 though, because I got 200 bones in my body. Exactly. But talk about your family real quick. I mean, if you feel comfortable and whatnot, you know what I'm saying. My family is from Alabama. That's where our southern roots are. We're migrational people, us Black people. The descendants of enslaved people. So we started off in Alabama, Tuscaloosa. Then we moved to Ohio because, of course, that was a free state and there was more opportunities there. And we set up camp first in Cleveland and then in Cincinnati. And then my mom came here when I was like 12. And just looking for job opportunities. We first landed in Kent, and then we went to Issaquah, and then we in Seattle. But what's your Genesis story? You know what I'm saying? Where your parents and all that stuff.
I love that question because, you know, it has, I think everything is very intertwined when it comes to Genesis stories, right? So my mom is, I'm first generation. My mom is from Taiwan, and her parents came to Taiwan as teenagers, young teenagers during the Cultural Revolution. So it's a few layers of cultural loss, you could say, from that side of my family. My dad is Ashkenazi Jewish by heritage, not so much by religion. And so they were, that side of my family was a few generations in New York already. And my dad is on the autism spectrum. And I was the firstborn. And so a big part of my Genesis story is actually realizing in retrospect that, you know, my family didn't really have the tools to arm me for the world that that was out there. Hip hop played a really big role in creating the community around me and providing me the tools to heal from some of the results of that.
Wow. That was very short and efficient, but there was a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, Taiwan, I got first associated with Taiwan was looking at the back of my G.I. Joes. I used to be a big G.I. Joe collector, and it said made in Taiwan. I remember I took a trip to I think 2016. I took about 96 students. Well, it wasn't just me, it was Lincoln High School. We took 96 students to China as guests of the Chinese president. Wow. Our first stop at a layover before we made it to China was Taiwan. I was like, the birth of G.I. Joes. Yes, I finally made it. I had like 70 G.I. Joes, man. I used to take them apart and change their limbs and everything. But look, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Thank you for sharing the uniqueness in your background. I never knew that your people was from Taiwan, and your pops was Ashkenazi Jew. Like what part of he's from Europe then?
Yeah, so Ashkenazi, this is a term that I learned because it's always hard to talk about racial identity in this country, right? So I used to say I'm half Jewish, half Chinese, but you can't really say Jewish because Jewish is, there's no ethnic heritage associated with that, right? So I learned the word from my little sister about 3 years ago, Ashkenazi. I've been using that. And it refers to people of Eastern European heritage of that with the shared cultural experience of Judaism.
Right. And that's one thing I'd be heavy on, man, especially all this stuff that came out years ago with Nick Cannon, stuff that came out with Kyrie Irving and, of course, Kanye West. Is really educating people on the fluidity and the spectrum of Jewish culture. It doesn't just look one way. So we got Ashkenazi Jews. I know I'm probably saying around. That's my Ohio accent coming out. Pardon self. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And we also have Sephardic Jews who are actually from the continent. But we also got Falasha Jews. Even if you dig deep into the text and whatnot, Rastafarians could consider themselves Jewish also because they say they're descendants of King Menelik and also King Solomon, who was a Jew. Mm-hmm. But also we have to understand too is that a lot of Black folks that were enslaved and brought here to America were Christians in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And if you study Christianity, especially the Old Testament, that all the ancestors of Christianity are Jewish people. And they are Black, brown, copper people. And also there is a group of Nigerian Jews also too that don't get a lot of props too. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and you're also really glad that you brought up the specificity that, I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. The accuracy of what kind of Jew your pops was. But you also mentioned something else. You mentioned that your father is on the spectrum, you know what I'm saying? Autism. What made you bring that up? Because that's a lot of unpacking too, is being, I'm in education, so I know what that means, but a lot of people don't know what that means. And what was it like being a child of an autistic, European white, you know what I'm saying, Jewish man. Like that's a lot to unpack.
I love my dad. My dad is in Austin now. He's having, challenges with his memory, but my dad is a brilliant human, really talented musically. Himself super influenced by like blues, like Howlin' Wolf, and like, a lot of like original blues and rock music. But so my dad, and I should say, was a self-diagnosis. They don't use this term anymore, but for Asperger's.
Yeah.
But I mention it because the more that I learn, the more that I grow, the more I understand sort of this whole picture of how things, why things kind of were how they were. Because my dad was not a very socially fluent person. He wasn't very in tune with his emotions, and sometimes at times not even very age appropriate in the information that we were given, just because of how he was. And so I think that, I bring it up because I identify as being on the spectrum too. I mean, of course, it's familial, but yeah, I think it's all part of
that's dope. I mean, yeah, man. I definitely I definitely appreciate that and whatnot, because growing up in the Black community, you know what I'm saying, we had a very strong word for those people. You know what I'm saying? We'd be like, oh man, dude he's a weirdo. You know what I'm saying? And then when we got really strong, we used that hard R, man, that retarded, you know what I'm saying, and stuff like that. But as we grow up and as we learn, if you so choose to and do your homework, you'll understand that it's not a disability. Even in my work, I'm really trying to bring in and condition even my colleagues and the other students with just using different terms, because I was assigned to special education when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So I had an IEP all the way up until I went to Old Day High School, because there's no such thing as an IEP or special education in private school, which was a gift, to me, because I was like, to get rid of the label and whatnot. However, that being said, I stray away from the word disability and say different ability. Yeah. Because even when they were, diagnosing me with ADHD and ADD, I learned very quickly as I got older that I'm going to go ahead and abandon the term that they call it a brain disorder. Mm-hmm. I was like, no, my brain just works differently. My brain was unique, and I understood that I had certain superpowers, super social powers that other people that don't have. Like, I'm able to multitask like nobody's other. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you understand that you have a different ability, and the same thing applies to people with Asperger's. Of course, working in education, you see the same thing. That's the first thing that came to mind when I asked you that question, like the social skills, man. And it's like the emotional intelligence is like, it's different. It's different. Yeah. Like, wow, like what this got real awkward. That's because our world is geared towards people who don't have Asperger's, who are not on that spectrum. So some of the stuff that they do might seem weird or something, but no, that's the universe they're working, and who is to say that we shouldn't, provide accommodations and then get accustomed to the world they're living in. Right. And see it from their perspective instead of being so, gung-ho and fascist about it. You know what I'm saying? Totally. And I think that the only way to live is just through a person who has these, high social skills. What I love about a lot of people on the spectrum is that they're just straight to the point, man. Boom, 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 boom. I'm like, right. Okay. Because I don't like passive aggressiveness. And for whatever reason, man, all the students I met on the spectrum, they just get straight to it. Right.
I think the other side of that, as a young person, and not having language around these things, the other side of that as a young person is a kind of a vulnerability and a naivety, right? Because if you're straight to the point, you understand things as being literal, then then you think other people are being the same way. And, you know, for young women in this world, it like very quickly, that quality can very quickly become very, can put you in danger, can put you in really precarious situations. And that's definitely what happened with me from a young age. And hip hop, again, like hip hop was very central in helping to heal and bring me back. And
Right.
a lot of what, you know, we do now with in community and creating and holding these spaces for like art and creativity is because you know, me and my partner and my organizing partner right now, Carolyn, we identify as, you know, being neurodivergent and understanding that art is an important language with which to maneuver and grow and learn about self, but also, you know, learn how to navigate this world as is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I found myself going back like through my mental Rolodex of all my friends and being like, damn, man, we were probably a little bit too hard on such and such, Malik and, you know, and Trey. They were probably on the spectrum, man. And we didn't even take the time to like make those accommodations and those adjustments so they could feel like they were in a safe place. That being said, growing up in hip hop specifically, and it's a hip hop culture is pretty much adjacent, you know what I'm saying, to Black culture. I can see how you could be like, yeah, though we didn't make accommodations, there were different aspects of that culture that embraced people for their uniqueness.
Yes.
Like when a cat got on the mic and was just rhyming different than everyone else, it could possibly be because they have a different ability and they're looking at the world totally different. When like I never will forget like my partners like I be talking to, right? And they be like, yeah, you know, this, that, and the third. They might be playing video games. They might be just hella just what we would call quote unquote blurs or black nerds. Man, when they grabbed the mic, Julie, they transformed into like something like comparable like to like a Eminem, you know what I'm saying, or a Tech N9ne. I'm like, how in the world did this dude who was just now a nerd start rapping like Tech N9ne? It was hip hop, and we gonna get to that. I want to come back to that, but I know you got two sides of the story, and I don't want to leave your mom's out of it. What was your mom?
And it's definitely like I feel like culturally, you know, that Chinese side of the family is what I felt most connected to always because, you know, we grew up speaking Mandarin, babysitters were Chinese, you know, went to Chinese school. And yeah, so my mom still lives, you know, here. I'm very close to my mom, my siblings. I have a little brother and sister. And she's brilliant and creative. I found out so much about more and more like that side of the family when my grandma passed. I found out that like from my grandma's side of the family, my great uncle, right? Great uncle, yeah, was a part of Mao's cadre. Like there was all these layers of like familial separation from the Cultural Revolution, and then from the original revolution that overthrew like the dynasties. And so it was really fascinating. There's I think like both ends of the family, there's creativity, but particularly on the Chinese side, there is cultural organizing as a tactic, as a belief.
How did your mom and dad meet?
They met in school. They met in college. My mom went to school in California.
And does your mom speak fluent English and everything? What she? Yeah, okay. Now you mentioned a lot about China. That might be throwing people off when you talk about Taiwan, and you mentioned Chinese, and you mentioned Mandarin. I might be a little bit rusty on this too. Did Taiwan used to be a colony of China or something? Is that the reason why they speak Mandarin and Chinese?
Yeah, so Taiwan has been many a colony. So Taiwan was yes. So Taiwan is a part of China. Technically, it's controversial.
Right.
Taiwan,
Hong Kong. Mm-hmm.
Right. But my mom grew up in Taiwan under martial law. The Cultural Revolution was happening in mainland China, and so the KMT fled to Taiwan, and a lot of families went with them. A lot of people sent their kids. So my grandparents separately were sent as young people to Taiwan.
Okay. Now, you said you grew up in Redmond. You never grew up anywhere in Seattle?
No, I mean, I grew up in Redmond, but I definitely started my Seattle adventures.
Yeah. Questing mission. I'm going on a mission to Seattle. That's how it was back in the day. Okay.
There was nothing in Redmond.
Right.
And again, my folks, I was allotted a lot of freedom at a very young age. Say that.
That makes sense. That actually makes sense, man. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of Seattle sense. Pacific Northwest with very liberal parents. That makes sense. Just the makeup of your parents and whatnot. Talk a little bit about you talked about like how hip hop kind of like changed your life and gave you that space. Like, what did that look like? How did hip hop do that?
I think so. I can't talk about this part without talking about the what to heal from part, because at a very young age I experienced, like many young women, sexual abuse, and my family didn't really know how to handle it. There was no resolution at the time for me, and so I started running away from home at a very young age, not because of abuse that was happening at the home, but because of the trauma, right? And in that process, I ended up on the streets. Like I was at the age of, so I was running away from like 11, 12, 13. And at that age of 13, I was actually trafficked to California. And my whole first like entry into relationship sex was as an underage sex worker at that age. And from there, I ended up incarcerated in Vegas. Long story short, there's stories. And a behavior modification for 6 months.
Wow.
So I was like, on the streets, I was incarcerated, I was trafficked, and then I came back to high school in Redmond. And that was a very confusing place to be. I feel like if it weren't for music at that point, I don't know if I would still be here.
Wow.
Process, and we really didn't know. I think it's the same for a lot of immigrant families. It's not like, when trauma occurs, there's not a toolkit for how to discuss it, heal from it, like together. So yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely appreciate and you sharing. I never knew that was your story. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what we do on Seed Talk, and I appreciate you being courageous, to share that and whatnot. So you said that hip hop gave you that space, like,
right. So it was through like, and then I felt connected to hip hop prior to all this, because, in junior high, I missed the question where we were talking about like where the hip hop journey, my first exposure was, because, I am like born in 84. I missed kind of the whole golden era or whatnot. My first exposures were like radio and the skate rink or whatever, but that's where I kind of found belonging in a friend group that was creative and so practicing. So we would rap and we would write and we would, draw. And so it was like something that I did. But then after, when I was old enough, so after, experiences and coming back, and I started to take music, because it was where it was like the only thing I wanted to take seriously, because the rest of the world really didn't make sense to me. I just knew I liked doing this.
Right.
And so I had connected with, through just some introductions and friends, had connected with X Kid from Immaculate Flav. And so I started working on my first EP that we put out in, I think, the year 2000, actually. I was 16 at the time. But through that experience, I started performing just random shows. We used to do, it used to be this spot in the North End called La Fiesta Mexicana that we used to do a bunch of shows at. But in that stretch is how I ended up at the Sit and Spin. And the Sit and Spin at the time was Sure Shot Sundays and the Jasir Media Group crew. Like,
shout out, rest in peace to Jonathan Moore, Seattle's hip hop mayor.
Yep, for real. I mean, and that was real. And that was my first, like, so I always say, like, when people ask, like, when did you really, like, my first entry into hip hop to me was entering that space, because that was, like, to me, the first time that I became aware, like, okay, there's a community around this. There's like a trajectory, like, it kind of opened my eyes to a lot.
Wow.
Hip hop in its natural form exists in community. And
right. Yeah, you're very good at being very efficient in your talking, and then there's a lot to unpack. So you mentioned Jonathan Moore and Jasiri and whatnot, and he's one of the people that's attributed to creating the term the wetlands. He had that one song, the wetlands, the wetlands, you know, and so at the 50th anniversary, it was really dope to see his son and his co-creator Erica, you know, rapping on the mic there on the stage down at the pier. I got this shirt from a Zulu Nation representative. Y'all had a booth down there. Talk about Danny from Mad K.
Yes.
Shout out to Danny.
So I met Danny.
Wait, hold on. So talking about a brother with different abilities, man. This brother, man, I just have to get him on the show so he could tell his story, but maybe you could tell a little bit of his story. But tell us how you met Danny, got connected with, you know, Mad K, you know, by default by meeting him, and how you got connected with the 206 chapter of the Zulu Nation.
Right. So I mean, Danny at the time, it was Chasm, Danny, and I met him at the Sure Shot, because I started going every week. Like, as soon as I found out that Sit and Spin Sure Shot Sundays was a thing, I was there every single week. And Danny was a big part of, I noticed King Chasm to everybody now, a big part of just my whole, I guess, foundation of hip hop in Seattle, because at the time, I feel like it was just like, hey, let's get on some music or something. Right. At the time, they were recording 911 America. Yeah. But I think it's important to note that at the time, there was no 206 Zulu like that. They were Mad K. It was Mad. Right.
And I was on that album too. That 911.
Yeah. That you had a prompt that was like, what is one of your beloved contributions? And I actually wrote down that I donated, like, I had a preamp at the time because I was trying to record myself, but I donated my preamp to the Mad K Studios, and that helped to record, like, all y'all vocals went through that preamp.
Yeah, I remember I recorded it at my house, in my attic, in my house in Burien, and then I submitted it. But we'll get to that, man. Shout out to Mad K, shout out to Danny, aka King Chasm, for giving so many artists opportunities to shed their light, man. So how did that manifest? Because you're right. You're educating me and reminding me, you know, it did start off just as Mad K. It wasn't 206 chapter.
It wasn't 206.
How did it get involved in that? Yeah.
And I was, you know, I remember, because my memory is so blotchy, you know. I know that Mad K had a whole lineage and legacy on Beacon Hill where they were, you know, holding it down at Jefferson Community Center and all of that. Yep. I was just like learning about that. I was just popping into the Mad K Studios, which was across the street from Danny's parents' house on Beacon Hill, and just recording and just really finding. I had never made music in community. Like, I had sat and wrote songs or recorded songs with a very specific, like, you know, shouts out to X Kid of Immaculate Flav, but it was very much like a product, like, process. So I never had this experience of like organic collaboration and what comes from that and all that. And so that was the relationship I had at the time with that space, which was the studio. And it's crazy because, so I was still in high school at the time. And because of sort of the troubled history I had, like I had to bounce around different high schools and stuff. And I had to finish, I think my diploma, which I've never seen, is from BEST, which is the Bad Kids School on the East Side, if y'all didn't know that.
What was the name of the school?
BEST.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. For us,
Yeah.
it's like Sharpless.
It's the one, yeah. If you get kicked out the other ones, you go to this sort of thing.
South Shore. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like I actually remember, and we thought we were getting over at the time, right? Because I was able to I needed work study credit. And I was like, I wonder if I could get work study credit, like for recording music, right? Like looks like this is a legit business over here. Like I'm over here doing stuff or whatever. And I remember asking Danny to sign the slip, and he was like, well, what do I say? Like he was like, I just signed it. And I'm like, yeah, just sign it. Like, and so it's crazy because I think over the years, right, there's so much more that kind of comes out. But like over the years, like he signed that form for like my high school work study credit. But then also a huge part of my, I went to Antioch University. That's like a later part of the story. But I was also able to document a lot of like hip hop learnings for college credit at Antioch, in which he helped to sign off on that too. So I always like joke that like, Danny, I wouldn't have finished school without you.
Yeah, we got so many, we have so many like leaders in the city. You know what I'm saying? It's not like Word Sarah with Jasiri, Vitamin D with Tribal Productions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then we got, there's so many more. And of course, we got the Mix-a-Lots, the big people. And then you got people like, King Chasm, Danny with Mad K. Like that's a unit, you know what I'm saying, in itself. It's a army of MP and artists.
Yeah.
So 206 Zulu Nation was
206 Zulu evolved out of that. So at the time he was going back and forth from New York and building all these relationships with folks that, led to the formation of 206 Zulu. But 206 Zulu at the time came out of Mad Crew, which was a community that, came out of Beacon Hill, but also Alpha P at the time, which is another like leg of my journey. And I always like to give props to, because at the time I also met Rajni Eddins at Sure Shot Sundays, and Poetry Experience, which was something that Rajni and Randy Eddins, his mom, ran for very many years, was also a huge formative part. Like both of those things, Sure Shot Sunday and Poetry Experience, was like my real life hip hop education, I feel like.
Rajni was just now on the show. We just now did a show with Rajni.
Really? Oh, I love it. We're bringing Rajni back September. So Rajni's going to be back in September.
Yeah.
And, On the Block.
Yeah.
Our event, and I'm so stoked to be able to celebrate the anniversary of Poetry Experience in that way. I still remember like the whole the whole opening prayer we used to say and all that.
He talked about that. Yeah, he talked about that. That's dope. So 206 Zulu Nation has been developed.
Alpha P.
Yep.
And then Cool Out, which at the time was Giorgio and Kitty, and which you see major part of the leadership now, right? And that was kind of the forces that came together to form what became the chapter of 206 Zulu. I understand that there were different iterations of Zulu chapters in Seattle prior to that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's dope. And I want to talk to the different ability in the room. When we talk about Danny making trips, to New York, he's doing this in like a mobilized wheelchair.
Yeah.
And that, you just
it wasn't even mobile at that time.
It wasn't.
I know, because I did a trip with him to Cleveland. We went to the Rock Hall for this hip hop educators thing. And it was not.
Wow.
It wasn't mobile. It was like we were just, and this is how it would be. Like he was taking all these trips with friends and fam, and we were literally carrying him, or like, navigating like the wheelchairs up and down the subways, and it was a lot. He put in
Yeah,
effort.
yeah, I have always admired Danny. He's always had such a peaceful soul. He's always been at peace with, his condition in life. I just admire him so much. This man be making beats, full studio, be rapping, from his chair and everything. And I mean, he's just dope, man. Shout out to Danny, man. Just kind
And
of,
dope visual artists too, like
yeah,
super
yeah.
dope.
That's my guy, man. Shout out to King Castle. That's my guy. So 206 Zulu Nation was created. And I'm gonna go ahead and get into this. Because the elephant's definitely in the room. I get an email. I get an email from you one day, and I never will forget it. And I remember like it was yesterday. Popped it open, and all this stuff was going on about BAM, Afrika Bambaataa, all these accusations, and you wanted me to sign a petition.
You signed it too. I went back and checked when I saw that question.
Yeah, I signed it, and I was very hesitant to sign it.
A lot of
I knew what was going on. I knew what was potentially going to happen. Is that a whole movement that was as powerful and meaningful, and just a nutrient to our community could be questioned because of the alleged actions of one person. And basically the petition was just like, man, just say that, you don't condone the actions of the alleged, I have to say alleged, you know what I'm saying? Stuff that started, to come out about Afrika Bambaataa and his alleged sexual abuse. Basically saying that he was using hip hop and the Zulu Nation to recruit, outreach, and groom young people, young men specifically. Don't really matter the sexuality when we're talking about non-consensual sexual abuse and rape. But that put a swing on it too, though. Let's keep it 100, because hip hop is so masculine. Hip hop can be very anti-gay. It can be very homophobic. And to find out one of the people who are the pioneers of hip hop music was not only an alleged rapist, but an alleged homosexual, or at least bi or whatever. And there were men coming out and just talking about their experiences. And it was just like, it was damn near like, no, it was surviving Afrika Bambaataa. I cannot remember the sister's name. She actually has a documentary series.
Really?
It's out on YouTube. Yeah, check it out. What's the one brother? I cannot remember. I can't remember the one light-skinned brother's name. He be saying some wild and reckless stuff on the internet. I forget dude's name.
I'm gonna find
He was one of the main dudes that came out and was talking about how Bambaataa had groomed him and was very inappropriate and abused him. Yeah. So that being said, you started this petition.
Hassan Campbell. It was Hassan Campbell was his name.
Yeah, Hassan Campbell. Yeah, everyone. I mean, if you're in the YouTube, if you're in the influence community, the Hassan Campbell he's kind of a big deal, and he's kind of a big deal for not good reasons, because he says some crazy stuff. I don't know how this brother is safe to walk the streets, man. He be saying some crazy stuff, and that really put a kind of a stain on his credibility too. A lot of people's like, man, this guy, man. But tell me what that was like. First, starting off, why did you decide to launch that petition? And let me say this. I decided to sign the petition because there were too many people coming forward, and I signed the petition to support the process of either vindicating or holding this brother accountable.
Yes.
Just to start the process. Yeah. Let's just start it. And I support that process to either vindicate this person or hold him accountable. And I felt like if I didn't do it as a community member, as a person who loves hip hop, then I felt like I would be irresponsible. It's like something happened. Oh, we're back.
Okay.
You there? Okay,
yes.
Cool. I don't know what just now happened, but it's like, saying that court shouldn't be held. You know what I'm saying? Like court shouldn't be held. And if hip hop is a respectable culture that it is, that this is a part of our culture. It's just kind of like a reservation with indigenous people. Like they have tribal law. If we want to be responsible and have this form of autonomy that we say we want so much, and we want to strip it away from labels, then we got to take care of ourselves. We got to handle business. So that's the reason why I signed it, because I know people are gonna be like, "Oh, you signed it, did it, whatever, man, whatever." But it's just like the same thing with Elijah Muhammad, with the accusations of him. It's like same thing with Dr. York. Like yet again, another, you know what I'm saying, organization, the conscious community, all their efforts can just be swept underneath the rug if we just concentrate on the allegations of one man. Right. And I signed it to say, okay, now I signed it. We started the process. Can we move on and just talk about all the great things that hip hop has done? Can we talk about, just like we talk about all the great things that the Nation of Islam has done, regardless of the allegations of Elijah Muhammad, blah, blah, blah. So why did you decide to get that? That was a bold move, man. I know you probably got some heat for that too.
Yeah. I mean, it was, yes, it was, yeah, that's definitely the case. It was very challenging. So for me, I first heard the allegations online like everybody else. And and I'm gonna just keep it real. And I'm not even that closely connected to hella, like every, Zulu king or whatever. Like I actually have always kind of felt a discomfort with the hierarchical structure of Universal Zulu Nation. And
why? Let's just talk about it. Why you felt? Let's talk about it.
Because there were some, I had some challenging experiences bringing together things, just various challenging experiences in my organizing. Like at the time, we were trying to organize with Hip Hop Congress and Universal Zulu Nation. There was all these overlaps, and in different cities it was working beautifully because it was the same people, and in other places it was like strange and we couldn't understand. Like there was these breakdowns that came from this structure that just things didn't make sense. And it really, there was times that I thought it was more insidious. Like this shit is FBI, is some COINTELPRO shit. Not that this is any less insidious, I guess, but just to back up to when I first heard, it took me 2 phone calls to find someone my age that was a victim. And this is not somebody who, has come forward publicly at all. But this is not somebody who's ever come forward publicly, and whoever will, or whatever. But so somebody who was deeply connected to the organization and represented the organization in different ways at different places, was connected directly to Afrika Bambaataa and was like, yeah. And so the fact that it was just it was like, I call like, folks here, then I started calling other people I know. And it just took me 2 phone calls. And that's all that's all I needed to know, because I'm like, so this is not even just back then. This is like this generation. And so now all these like hierarchies and this secretiveness and these like, it made sense. It was like, oh, this is why. So I believed it after that. To me, it doesn't matter, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know the specifics or whatever. Like, I believe the victims, and it was important. I had the benefit, and I really want to name this. I had the benefit of being in connection with incredible women like DJ Cuttin Candy, and Rosa Clemente, because that letter that you signed, that was a collaborative effort of us 3. Rosa is in New York, Candy is in the Bay, and all of us have been, like, I consider myself a Zulu member. They each consider themselves in close proximity to the organization, and we felt it was really important because we knew that what the organization was going to do. We felt it was really important as people with a lot of love and respect and proximity to come out and say what we said, which is that we believe it, And we think this is important to acknowledge and examine, and for the sake of hip hop, for the sake of culture, for the sake of I don't know, truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the petition, what was the goal of the petition, and did it accomplish it? What did it accomplish?
I think our goal at the time, our goal was to force the conversation and to represent parts of the organization and parts of hip hop, which were going to treat the issue with the seriousness and we just wanted people to do the right thing, what was happening at the time was that there was all these accusations that people are trying to take down Zulu, people are trying to take down Afrika Bambaataa, it's a conspiracy by the government and all of this. And we didn't want to see people who have been harmed dismissed in that way. And yeah.
Yeah, I
started.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, I get a little emotional inside, you know what I'm saying?
And then I don't know if I can put a link, because it's still like online. I don't know if.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I brought it up. Like, what was the goal and what is it accomplished? I think that it accomplished that. I think that, you know,
we have this
out there. And I think that what it also does is, but we can't just bring awareness to it. I think there needs to be further education around it in certain spaces. And I say that to say this. Number one, I would like it to give him an opportunity to come forward to either deny or collaborate, you know what I'm saying, with these accusations. I think me as a man, as an artist, as a Black man, I'll be fighting with my PR all day if they said don't say anything. I'm like, nah, man, that's just not true. Or it is, or this is circumstantial. I get it. Why he wouldn't say anything. But so that's that. I would just like the opportunity for him to defend himself. You know what I'm saying? Or lean into it. Whatever. But number two, I think that when we talk about this and we're talking about hip hop, we have to take it very, very seriously, and we have to start moving with intentionality in our culture. And this is what I mean. See, a lot of people like, man, here we go. He about to go deep. Here come the educator. No, I mean, I think that, well, I know that we need to create safe places where people can do this art and don't have to worry about there being ulterior motives.
Yeah.
Let's keep it a buck. We always talk about these stories about men who are producers and who have power in the industry or power at a label or something, inviting a very, very talented woman artist, or maybe not so talented woman artist, to the studio. And their motive is to, you know what I'm saying, engage in romantic or sexual relationships with them.
Yeah.
Period. It's not about the music. Or if it is about the music, then that becomes a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we know that about women. But let's just keep it a kilo, man. This stuff happens with men all the time.
Yeah.
But due to the masculine, you know what I'm saying, nature and culture of hip hop, a lot of men don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be called gay or feminine.
Yeah.
But I've heard stories from men who have said they had to walk out of the studio because they've been propositioned by other men. If that's what it's going to take for me to get signed onto this label, or for me to get your access to opportunities, hey, bro, I'm not going to perform oral sex on you. I'm just going to keep it a buck with you. These are multiple stories I've heard this.
Yeah.
And as responsible, mature artists and curators of this culture, you know what I'm saying? If there's going to be any kind of relationship between, it can't be coerced, has to be consensual. And we have to create safe places where people can just walk into a studio or a space and feel like they're safe, man. They don't have to worry about any harm being done to them. And we need to start teaching how to do that. Because quite frankly, embarrassingly enough, a lot of people, men, women, and children in our culture do not know how to create safe places. Period.
Yeah.
Period. Like, look around and read the room. Should you be saying that on the mic? You might want to keep that in your diary, bruh. How you feel about members of our community. You know what I'm saying? We've come a long way. And I'm not about censorship, but I am about reading the room, and I am about protecting the most vulnerable in our community.
Yes.
And I'm not saying you can't say the stuff that you want to say. If you want to be anti-gay, make sure everyone in the room is anti-gay. That's all I'm saying. I'm gonna keep it real with you. If you wanna rap violence and you're a gang member, make sure everyone in the room is a gang member and is down with selling drugs and stuff. Because you run the risk if you bring it out into a mixed, blended community, and there are people that are not on the same wavelength, and you're not aligned, and do not create multiple opportunities to create intersection, then you're gonna run into some problem. Be ready to deal with the consequences of not reading the room correctly.
Right.
And we need to teach people how to do that. Because maybe some people aren't coming to your shows or being on your album because they think you're creepy and they've heard it.
Maybe you are creepy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how did that impact you as an artist, though, doing that? And how did it impact your loyalty and your allegiance to 206 Zulu Nation? Because you are still a member, right?
I am. Well, I mean, there was definitely a significant amount of internal, at the time it happened, things were confusing, things were crazy. People didn't know who to believe. I feel like I'm an individual where I was always clear on my loyalties were always to the city, to Mad Crew, to my community, like the people I knew directly. It wasn't to a structure of that I didn't really understand, which is Universal Zulu Nation. It was not that I didn't, I don't think that I was torn up about that as much as I was torn up about the temporary damage that it did to my relationships because people didn't agree at the time with the tactics. And so that was tough.
So you say people didn't agree with your tactics. Well, I mean, if you feel comfortable talking about it, like, what kind of response did you get? Are you talking about people were threatening you, or let's just get to it? No. Okay. That's actually surprising. That's actually surprising because I've heard people, like, being threatened, like, especially if we talk about in New York, people who were talking about this stuff, their lives and their safety was being threatened.
Yeah, and that was the argument, and that was really what people were saying. They were saying you're gonna get like people hurt for like that was part of why people were like, well, we shouldn't say anything, like, so that was part of it. It was more than just people. It was definitely more nuanced than people being like, nah, I stand with Bam. It was definitely, oh, I froze.
Shoot. No, you're good. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Okay. You froze, but we can still hear you. Go ahead.
It was definitely, I think, pretty rapidly, folks, at least pretty rapidly, a lot of the leadership, and it's kind of messed up to say, but like the farther from New York that a Zulu chapter gets, the more healthier it tends to be. And so pretty rapidly, the leadership on the West Coast realized that there was something going on. And so it wasn't so much like people blindly loyal as it was how to deal with it.
Right.
And I think that, and sort of, I think that part of what we did with making this conversation so public in the way that we did, and, you signed the letter, but then also we had a lot of people nationally that signed as well. And and a lot of big names that signed. And so it did kind of force this layer of honesty and this approach that not everybody agreed with.
And you know, that's the uncomfortable thing to deal with. When you talk about community, you're talking about family.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it a kilo with y'all. We all know we have family members that do some very suspect, insidious, nefarious stuff, man. We have rapists in our family. Let's just keep it real. And what's really hard to navigate with that, though, Julie, is saying you love someone even though they do things that harm people.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where I'm coming from, and that's where we need to get to as a culture, as a family, as a hip hop community. It's like, I still love Bam.
Yeah.
I do. I love that brother. But that's coming from an educator who, through my 25, 26 years, you know what I'm saying, visit, even, if it's via Zoom, and I still mentor and life coach murderers. I still love them. I still love them. I still love Bam. Whether he did it or not, I still love him. And we got to understand that doesn't condone what people do. And let's make that transition and get away from Bam. Anyone in this community that's doing stuff that's wrong, it doesn't mean that we don't love you if we hold you accountable. That's a part of loving you, is to hold you accountable, because that prevents the next person maybe from doing it and prevents you from doing it again.
Totally. And I agree like 1,000%. And because, I identify as abolitionist, like I don't believe in the carceral system. But the other side of that is like, then you can't be carceral. You can't be punitive, right? Like,
exactly.
Interpersonally, like it's a lot to hold, and it's tricky to discuss because we are in this era now where the currency is attention. So the more like outrage that you could get, the more canceled you could get, like all of it is like that has its own inertia. And so people are taking these like absorbed ways of being and dealing with harm, and it becomes all performative online. And then the people benefiting are the ones who own these platforms. And it's just it's really hard. It's really hard.
When I say they, sorry to cut you off, I mean crass consumer capitalist power structures have been able to successfully monetize our trauma for years.
Yes.
America's main export is culture. And with culture and pop culture is coolness. And it's melanated people, Aboriginal people of the sun, Black folks, brown folks, that make America cool. We determine what is cool. That being said, I want to talk to another elephant in the room. Aside from, how people responded with your petition and whatnot, how were you accepted in the hip hop community? Being a person, who's this light-skinned sister? She's so racially ambiguous? Is she Latin? I know you get it. I know you get all kinds. You know how I know you get it? Because I even get it. You got to be mixed with something. Are you Filipino? Are you Ethiopian? Are you Arab? So how were you accepted? What was it like in hip hop culture, especially in the Northwest?
I feel like, like I said earlier, like I found belonging in hip hop because I found, and maybe it's just me, mixed kid shit. We don't ever feel belonging anywhere. And that's just a baseline, whatever. But I found more belonging in hip hop than I felt in most places. And even including like, the Asian lunch table, for example, right? Like, because I'm not looking like how I feel on the inside. There was just always this dissonance when it came to identity. So, even though there's of course like moments where people are like, what the fuck? Or, you know what I mean? Like, whatever, like I still felt like, I don't know that I felt that more with hip hop than I did in other aspects of my identities, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I like
And
that.
especially here when, it is a lot of, mixed folks and yeah.
Yeah, and I was just not thinking about that yesterday. I was walking around, little inside story. I was walking around Vancouver, Canada. And I'm looking around and I'm looking at all these fixtures. So all these indigenous, First Nation, Native American, fixtures in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm looking and I'm like, totem poles, all this native art. But I maybe have seen one Native American, you know what I'm saying, by aesthetic value of what we, been accustomed to accept as a Native American when I've gone to, British Columbia. And they kind of like wipe everyone else out and they whitewash everything, but then they keep the artifacts. And I've started to think about Northwest culture, especially Seattle hip hop culture. It's like we don't have like the quantity privilege that a lot of people have. Like you might have a lot more white allies out here because the numbers are so low of black and brown copper people out here. And so it's like we got to work with what we got. But it makes me feel good inside to know that people in their communities where they feel marginalized in their communities. Because I talk to Noah Prince a lot, and he feels the same way. It's like as a white dude, as a white Jew, he's like, I felt more accepted around hip hop culture and black folks than I even felt around my own white folks because I was just different.
Right.
I was a different cat. So I love the fact that hip hop culture and music is a safe place for people to feel comfortable. But I also know that I don't want the culture and authenticity of the culture and even the governance of it to suffer because we are so embracing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I always wanted to be like, this is an American Black, African diasporic, and Afro-Latino, culture. It was created by the diaspora. And absolutely. I never wanted to look like what corporate hip hop looks like.
Right.
There's so many different ways I can say it, but I'm not a passive aggressive person. Yeah. I'm just keep it real with y'all. I mean, I want my hip hop melanated.
Right.
I said it, and but there were some conversations that that we need to have in the Pacific Northwest, and I wanted to ask. That's what leads me to the next question. Is because we need to have questions of what it looks like to curate hip hop. When we celebrate the 50 years of hip hop in Seattle, what does that look like? And that's why I think that when we had that celebration in the period, that was an accurate, manifestation of it, from the Pinoy Panay community, the Filipino community was out there, and there was Latinos out there was Black folks out there. But I wanted to ask you, what makes hip hop in the Pacific Northwest? What makes it unique? What is it about this hip hop culture in Seattle and the greater metropolitan area, in Tacoma?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I feel like there's so many ways to answer that. I have a few thoughts that bubbled up. Like, first of all, I feel like there's so much talent out here. And I also, like, a lot of people talk about like the industry is flooded or everybody's doing it or whatever. I actually feel like that's a good thing. I feel like because so many people participate in the art form, it like you have this, like, the par is high, right? So I feel like that's the case. But I feel fortunate enough, like I feel very aware of the connection that hip hop, like, historically, at least if you look at like Seattle and the Central District and that narrative, like its direct connection to the legacy of things like Black theater or like Pan-African organizing. And like there is like this, and maybe again, it might be because there was such a small community, but I feel like there's a direct lineage in Seattle that can be traced pretty specifically, that's really powerful and contributes directly to like the establishment of something like Africa Town, right? And like what you see happening in like the Central District I feel like that proximity is still, that's really special. And I kind of mourn, not that I mourn it, but like, you know, hip hop history is so often discussed as far as like the music industry, but I mourn the parts of the history, not mourn, but I guess I should say, I wish to help tell stories and hear more stories about the connection to community and community empowerment that has always been here. And Seattle overall, I think, has a special relationship to how it kind of self-organizes around these things. Like, we're the only city, right, that had like a WTO protest. Like, that impacted the whole country, but we went buck wild, right? And there is
or a chop. You had chop too. Don't forget about chop.
Exactly. I thought about saying it, but I wasn't gonna say it.
Nah, man, we gotta talk about it. Yeah, we gotta talk about But anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
We do things different here. We're kind of radical. We're kind of decentralized. We're kind of cliquey, but that also allows for this kind of like potency. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it. I think it's special.
We got to be responsible. You know, I always like to be responsible with my breadcrumbs and the Easter eggs, not the goose eggs, the Easter eggs that we drop here on C Talk. And she said WTO, which is the World Trade Organization. We had a big protest in the streets, and you know they ran down there and just tore.
Almost every single other major city impacted across the world protest, right? Except in the United States, we were the only ones. There were protests everywhere, but you know,
and then I mentioned CHOP, which I think it got changed to Chaz. I don't know if it was Chaz was first or CHOP was first.
CHOP.
And then Chaz was Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where we just took over a precinct and they ran. I think they chose to leave though. And I think it was more of a political move for the police department. Said, "Oh, you guys think y'all can handle this? Okay, we're just going to leave." But it was pretty profound and powerful. Like, that's the first time I've ever heard of a community of like rebellion to make the police leave their precinct, and basically took over. It was probably like maybe 3 or 4 city blocks, you know what I'm saying, and diameter, and yeah. And basically just set it down, and it became like it developed and evolved into like a tent city almost. And but you have vendors out there. It was during COVID also, so it was an opportunity for people to indulge and invest in some independent business ventures, if you get what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, there were 3 people who I think were killed during, and they were all black males. And that was the sad thing about it. But I hear what you're saying when it comes to Chaz. I think I never heard it put like that. When I think about it, I'm reflecting. That does make sense. Like, if you follow hip hop, eventually you go. I mean, like, very, very, very soon you're going to find out other things that are pertinent to Black folks and indigenous people in Seattle. I don't know. That was very connected to Chaz. Like, you went to Chaz, hip hop was there. I don't know. I wasn't down there for WTO, so I don't know if you went down there and you saw a lot of hip hop down there. But definitely for Chop and Chaz, you go there and it was definitely adjacent to hip hop culture. There was a lot, you know, shows going on there and people selling their merch and stuff like that. So,
and we were down there for Occupy too. That was a little plug for that.
Yeah. There is a strong connection between hip hop culture and, I guess some people would say, strong left wing politics here in Seattle. I'm just telling you what.
I don't think it's just here in Seattle though. I feel like hip hop. You look at like the cultural practices of like DJing, right? What are you doing? You're like you're occupying and repurposing music, right? Like I'm seeing same thing, like graffiti. Of course, you're taking the space. You know, like it is like it's reclamation, like in all ways. And so,
but a lot of hip hop is very like Republican too. Like, it's very, you know what I'm saying? You know, just, you know, capitalistic. You know what I'm saying? You know what?
Well, that's the product of the system.
I think to be more precise, and I love the fact that hip hop has reached 50 years. We need to start acknowledging that hip hop is a universe, and it's not just left wing, it's not just right wing, it's not just the middle. It's an entire universe of planets, and depending on where you go in the hip hop universe, you're going to have a different experience.
Yes.
Period. Point blank.
Yes.
Seattle hip hop is uniquely different than like New York hip hop.
Yes.
Or even the Bay Area, even though, we're like little brothers and sisters of Oakland, hence, the Black Panther Party. We have the second largest chapter outside of Oakland. Yeah. But I know a lot of Seattle people are very, very, loyal to Seattle. But let's just keep it 100, man. We get a lot of our slang and a lot of our swag from the Bay Area. We do.
We have a lot of authentic exchange with the Bay Area and a lot of
absolutely
economic conditions.
It's definitely friendly competition. It's definitely friendly. It definitely is.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot. Because that's what I listened to. That I didn't listen to a lot of East Coast hip hop coming up. I listened to Bay Area, even the South more than what was going on in New York. I had to learn that all later.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. And I was gonna get into this next topic of the hip hop elite, but I'm gonna save that for an episode all to itself. Maybe next week we can get on and talk about that, because I got some views on that. I think there's a place and not so much a place for the hip hop elite. But we do something here on C Talk at the end of each one of our shows. Is the educator in me. It's like, what's the plan of action, or what is the homework? And after we've talked about everything we've talked about today, what is your plan of action, and what is your homework? I'll go first so you can kind of get an idea. I don't want to put you on the spot, so you can think of something. I know you're pretty quick on the spot anyways, but for me, based on what we talked about today, what is the plan of action? If my plan of action for y'all, and if hip hop, if you're in hip hop, and what the homework is, if you're in this culture and you, in any capacity, whether it's a venture capitalist, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a performing artist, whether it's a visual artist, whether it's an entrepreneur, anything, create safe places where more people can feel safe, and also create safe places where your first priority, that's monotonous, sorry, redundant. Your priority is to serve the most vulnerable in the room. That could be a handicapped person, that could be a woman, that could be a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, that could be a child. Most times, trust it or not, it's a child. It's a child. But I would say my plan of action as homework is create safe places for the most vulnerable, to be confident and to feel important. What will be yours? What will be your plan of action or homework?
My plan of action or homework right now, I think, is to tell more stories. Because I feel like the stories are important. I feel like the new generations, young people, I see a lot, people always feel like they're starting at square one, right? And there's so much value to be, there's so much time to be saved, a value to be derived just by sharing more, and I think that a lot of times folks are hesitant, because the people who aren't hesitant to tell their stories, those are the ones you hear. But I think that, people with maybe, so I think for me, I would like to tell more stories, and share more, just to support more, to provide more resources for the young people coming up now and navigating things now, because it's confusing. And I feel like I was very fortunate to have that in a number of different arenas, in people like Kim Pollock at Bellevue College, and Wanda Hackett at Antioch, and Laura Peace Kelly, and Miss Olisa, and Jasiri Media Group. There was now it's harder because the city has grown so much so quickly, and people can still benefit though. So yeah, that's my thing.
Yeah, you said a big name, man. You said a lot of names, but Laura Peace Kelly, man, she keeps coming up in these seed talks, man, and I gotta have her on the show.
Yeah.
But hey, it's been man. Great show, great show. We gotta have you on again. Everybody out there, it's been Julie C, hip hop artist, activist. I trust that you cool with that title. Please share and comment this. Get in the chat, man, and engage with it. Everyone know it's been Seed Talk. Make sure that you got donate and whatnot. I'll put Julie C's information in the chat when this airs if she feel comfortable with that. But hit me up at Cash App, Logic Amen, and at Venmo, Logic Amen, if y'all want to donate to us. But it's been Julie C. It's been Logic Amen. And of course,